Hello and welcome to my podcast, Learn Reiki and Connect, and it's with me, Tracy Matthews. So I hope you're well and I hope you have enjoyed the holiday seasons and just some little bit of time, rest and rebooting. So we are looking really at helping each other to connect that light within because it's there. Many of us are going through spiritual awakenings. There's being shifts. And we're beginning to realise that there is more to what's going on just in our physical lives. So this space is really about helping people to get a sense of really what's behind the physical experiences, see through the lens of your soul, so that you can see your truth and understand and translate what it all means, the experiences that we go through. And of course, this is always a part of you that is already navigating and it knows why we are here. And I mention it every time because once we really build a sense of what that is for us, the higher self, their inner voice, or the soul, then we begin to really understand that internal intuition and that voice, that inner sense and knowing that we all have. So this podcast is about the Akashic records. Now I mentioned that in my last podcast because I think there's still a lot of mystery around the Akashic records. I know when I sort of came across it, I wasn't too sure what it was, but I'll talk about that. But maybe you've just sort of clicked on there because you're kind of maybe drawn to it. Or maybe you know a little bit about the records. Or maybe you're just at that point where you're ready to find out some information. What does it mean? So what are the records then? Where is the records located? And does it have any significance to you and your life? And if you've got the desire to access your records, well, what can you even find out about that? And are there any benefits? You know, maybe you've been drawn to this topic and you're not even sure why. So stick around, stay tuned, don't go anywhere. Please hit the subscribe button because I will be talking weekly about different subjects and different information that's going to really help us on our journey here. So let's just go back really to the Akashic records because, you know, we're all going through some level of shift and some level of awareness and what we're now, you know, coining this spiritual awakening. And I have to admit, when I sort of got into mine, it was around about 2010. That wasn't so sort of like out there as much, but I certainly started to be moved and drawn. And of course, one of the things that really came into my experience was Reiki. Now, at that time, I had a treatment room in 2010 and I was exhausted. I was really busy and I didn't feel right. And of course, what happened with me, I met this person, she mentioned about Reiki, and then I did the Reiki course and it was everything that I needed at that time. Now, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to, you know, do this for others. I'm going to be teaching and helping others. That just wasn't even in my mind back then. It wasn't even an intention. But then I began to realise the effect that it had in my life and how this really sort of kind of was the catalyst and helping me on my journey. In fact, what I found is that connecting to source energy just comforted me. It just felt so familiar. And that divine love of just tuning in and meditation. And you've heard me mention before, it's meditation, but you see, we also realise that when we connect to source energy, we can heal ourselves at so many levels. the physical, the mental, and the emotional level, the psychological part of us. And he knew that. So this was really quite a significant part of my spiritual journey. Maybe you have learnt Reiki, maybe you are just realising just how important that is for you, or perhaps you thinking about just what that really means and finding your way and how that you can really tune into that part and just sort of help peace and stop the mind monkeys and, just feeling stressed all the time, but just finding ways that we can sort of navigate a busy and pressured life and a noisy life at that. So it's just very beautiful how that came into my life, and that really was something, I call it like tripping a switch, because that was incredible for me. And I still appreciate and love the warmth of source energy and just that frequency that we can get into. And what I found was a little bit unexpected. I wasn't even prepared. The fact that I accessed something inside. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure because there wasn't too much labels around. But of course, I know that now to be the inner voice, the higher self. Because I began to hear it, feel it, and know it. I began to get a sense of that part of me that was bigger than little me. It was huge. And of course, that's when in 2012 and 2013, that all-knowing part just got bigger. And I've made reference to it. You've probably heard me talk about it in other podcasts. I call that, I became like a dog with a bone. Because what switched in me was, I've been here before. And I'm not sure if I actually had any conscious awareness about that before. Does that resonate with you? Have you been here before? Do you get a sense of that? And of course, what that did for me, I started looking at this term, Akashic Records. And that's when I came across Linda Howe. You've probably heard of her. She pioneered this and really started to sort of help us to understand what it was. In fact, she used and put together a pathway prayer. So it was like an intentional way in which we can sort of access that part. So, like I said before, I didn't realise just how powerful that part was. It was huge. And maybe right now you're getting a sense of that part of yourself. It's like it's all-knowing. It has so much love. It kind of knows things, and that sort of filters through. So we're going to find out some key information that's going to help you tune in to that wisdom and that knowledge using the tool of the Akashic Records. So don't go anywhere. Please stay tuned, because we're really going to sort of talk about this. Because we're going to look at the first thing that we really want to find out. Well, what are the Akashic Records? Maybe you are aware of what they are, and you might be familiar that it has been sort of translated as like space, beyond, meaning sky, heaven. So we're kind of getting to that realization that this is not a physical place. In fact, if anything, it's non-physical. Now, there are other terms that you might be aware of, and one of them is a library. So have you heard of that? That the Akashic Records are like a library. Well, what does this library have in there? Well, it's got every single life that you have experienced. And I remember when I came to the realization of that, I just thought, wow. And part of me kind of already knew that, which can be very odd when we get to these realizations. It kind of resonates. You know, it's also likened to, and this is perhaps a more modern day analogy of putting it, that the Akashic Records is sort of like in the ether, that there is that information and we simply log into it. So using a modern analogy, and look how we use Google. You know, we set a search term in it and we draw that information out. And I like that analogy because it's pretty much like that. Once we sort of know how to access and know how to get that information, the higher self can give us that kind of information. So that might sort of resonate with you. What are some of the things that you've heard of the Akashic Records? And does it make sense? Because I teach weekly, and quite often people will say, oh, what are the Akashic Records? So I still think there's a lot out there that are not aware fully what the term means, or even, you know, where it's located and what the implications are for us. So I think it's really nice to sort of find out, because this was something that came up for me. Well, where are they located? You know, is it far, far away? Is it way up into the sky, as it sort of seems to indicate beyond heaven? Or is it closer? And this is where I normally talk to people and sort of get them to sort of understand that it's a lot more within us than we realise. This is not outside of us. And I'm going to use the example that I use for others, and it's simply to do with our chakra system. Now, you probably know a lot about your chakra systems because most of us are sort of getting aware of the correlation between, you know, the spiritual body and the physical body, and, you know, what they look like. And I have done a written blog article on that, about the chakra system, because I think they're fantastic. They are one of the most biggest show and tell we've got, and we can find out so much about the flow and what's going on in our physical lives simply by understanding the chakra system. So what's this got to do with the Akashic Records? Well, we have 7 located within our physical body. The physical body, the subtle body. But I want to draw your attention to one that lays just above your 7th chakra. Now, this is the 8th chakra. And this is how we start to access more of the expanded universe. This is where we start really sort of on our journey, increasing our spiritual awareness. You know, we've said there's all the wisdom and knowledge within. Well, where is it within? And I've often wondered, well, where is it? And it sort of took me a little while to sort of over the years to realise it's within us. It's actually located within our chakra. And interestingly, with the 8th chakra, this is where we begin to sort of understand karma, and then how we begin to sort of free ourselves from this build-up. Because held within this 8th chakra is our karmic, if you like, accumulation after lifetime and lifetime, which we've sort of built up. So what is that accumulation? Well, it's self-limiting beliefs. It's patterns. It's cycles that we all get into us. We are creatures of habit. And I've seen that within myself, and I have seen that with others. And maybe you're aware of that yourself. Sometimes we like to do. I mean, I know there is this thing where we like to be free, but I'm talking a little bit more on a deeper level, where we kind of do the same things, you know, and not so conscious of it until we start realising there's something a little bit more that's going on in our lives. This eighth chakra is where our connection to the higher self and beyond is fully embraced. It's who we are. Helps us to understand our gifts, our purpose, the plan that you and I made before we got into our physical bodies and experiencing the life that we've got now. This is where we sort of get a soul awareness, And I'd mentioned before in a previous podcast where we are not alone. This is where we begin to appreciate and understand and remember that we have guides, non-physical energies and loving beings that are helping us in our physical lives. We were part of that when we got in here. It's just that when we get here, we kind of feel that we're separated. We kind of feel like we're a little bit alone, but of course we're not. So where is the Akashic Records located? Well, actually, it's within you. I think perhaps that might help you to understand, because I know it did me, where we keep hearing there is nothing outside of ourselves. And I had to sit with that and kind of get the logistics. Well, where is this information? Well, it's within us. It's within the deeper part of our mind, our subconscious. And this part of what we're talking about now is the Akashic Records. This space, this frequency, this part of our library, which is your history. It's you, what you've been doing, who you are, how you started. All this kind of information is held within you. And perhaps now there's a little bit of cognizance now. That's why there is so much wisdom and knowledge. We've just got to kind of work out a way that we can access it, hear it, tune into it. That's the key when we get here. So I hope that's sort of kind of helped you to understand, because it did me and it's helped others that we've kind of had this conversation with, so that we begin to understand this is not something far, far away. It's not outside of us. We are accessing something at a deeper level that you already know. So it brings us on to the next part. Well, what's the significance of knowing perhaps any information in the Akashic Records that your higher self might show you? And does it even have any bearing or significance on your life right now? Well, I would answer absolutely yes. Very much so, because it did me. Because like we said, it's all the knowledge, it's all the information, and this is how we learn. This is how we grow in our physical lives. This is where our higher self starts navigating us and starts bringing the consciousness and awareness to the fore. This is how we start to sort of get an understanding of who we are. Never by chance, when I see a person in person on the Reiki course, or whether they're online, it's never by chance. It's always led by that part. It's that part now, the inner voice, the bigger me that is now ready to find a way that we tune in without the hit and miss, but now to find a way and meditate so we can now tune in and listen to that part of us. It's never by chance. So does that have any significance if we're led to our Akashic Records? Yes, there is very much a benefit around that. And what that looks like quite often, and we're going to go into some of the information that you can find out, but what that did with me, as I was mentioning, I began to realise I'd been here before. And it was kind of an odd feeling. It's kind of a bit of a surreal feeling. And I would just like to share with you when I was just working with the pathway prayer, and you might be familiar with that, with Linda Howes, and she's got a whole set of sort of words and frequencies of actually accessing that. It was incredible, because I'm not the most visual, and I've shared that before. But when I did that, I started to see kind of lights, and I had my pen and paper there, and I started to see in my mind's eye two sort of individuals. The first individual was an 18th century woman, and she was very angry because she was poor, and I could feel her energy. In fact, that's when I started to realise, ooh, that felt like me. And it was quite interesting, because one of the reasons why I was accessing, and I've made reference to this, I had a real trouble with manifestation. And I felt like a little bit hard done by. So I accessed my records, and I wanted to find out what's been going on. Why? Can you give me any information? And I saw that image in that mind's eye of being quite resentful, quite angry, and underneath the facade of that 18th century sort of wear and the wig, I was quite unwashed, quite unkept. But I was angry about that. And then I saw another image, and this was a male. This was a priest, a vicar, and this priest was crying, and I just became overwhelmed with that emotion. I felt the emotion and how stuck I felt in that life, and how I was imploring God to help me to sort of get through, because I found it so difficult. And I found that quite interesting, that these two very different former me's that my higher self showed me, and how I was able just to sort of see, well, I'm here again. I'm almost building up that resentment with not being able to get what I wanted at that particular time in my life, and how I was still imploring and sort of seeking advice from my higher self, to source, to God, whatever we want to call it. So I found that experience very interesting, actually very helpful. And that whetted my appetite to find out a little bit more, and how my higher self guided me and showed me those two former selves. And, you might be wondering, well, how did you know it was your former self? Well, I felt me. It's like I was seeing me in my mind's eye, feeling the emotion and all what was going down there as to what is actually I'm feeling when I was presently at that time in my life. And that I found quite a surreal but very powerful point of just how powerful the Akashic records were. And as I've mentioned before previously in lots of places of podcasts and in blogs, well, that just started me going. That really started me on a journey of wanting to find out more, because I knew if all wisdom and knowledge and all the answers are within, there's got to be a way of accessing that. So, this is where I started to sort of look into it personally a little bit more. So what are some of the things that you can find out? Well, I'm just going to sort of highlight a couple of them, because I think you might find them quite interesting. Now, I made mention in the last podcast where, try this to manifest what you want. Because this was one of the most breakthrough moments for me that I had. Not only was it just the fact of the Akashic records, but I could see how I was manifesting. Now, if you haven't heard that podcast, please listen to it, because it's really helpful. because we've got help. We've got multidimensional helpers and beings that are hearing us and that want us. It's just that we've got to sort of shift into intention. I go into it a little bit more there. But that is really powerful. And when I read for a total stranger, they're often quite surprised that this is being brought up, because they too are either having issues around manifestation, or I can see that they're manifesting. In fact, if anything, what their higher self is showing, just put a little bit more intention on that and you will manifest greatly what you want. So that's really powerful. That's really incredible. That's one of the things that your higher self, that your Akashic records, your records can show you and help you to know how are you doing with manifesting, because it's hard. Some of us find it really hard, and others seem to have got it down. You've just got to find your way. But that was one of the things that helped me to really start manifesting. And now I can manifest. I've done it, I found it, and I will use that in where I want to go and what I want in life. One of the other things as well that your Akashic records can help you find out is to really home in and get down to your purpose. What are you here to do? Now, when this comes through, and I had it comes through like a niggle. It comes through sometimes like a pang, or a little thing that's unsettling you. You might feel it in the pit of your stomach, in your heart center. It might be consuming you. You're here to do something, but you are not doing it. And this is quite interesting, because this is where I was able to really home in on what I was here to do. Because outside of that, what that looked rather, if we put it into the 3D physical experience, I was feeling unsettled, lost, and quite anxious inside. But I didn't know it was even to do with the fact this was around my purpose. I just knew that something inside was kind of getting my attention and kind of niggling. And I just want to pause for a moment, because maybe that is something that's going on for you at the moment. Might be one of the reasons why you've just been guided, because we all are being guided by that part. When we listen in and we tune in to podcasts, to courses, to listening to something, whatever that is, and we just get that little spark, that little something where your guides, your higher self, source has gone, that's the bit that's missing. That is where you can find out some information. And I've seen for others, and I've seen for myself, where you're here not only for your purpose, but you're here to do something. You're here on assignment. And how that translates into the 3D is like a dread. There may be a little bit of a dread around that. There might be something that that you could move into, but there's a lot of fear around it, a lot of dread. So that's one of the powerful things, that your Akashic records holds that kind of information. Another thing which I just want to sort of move into is to really help you to understand relationships around you. Boy, I've just found that fantastic. Even down to my daughters. Different energies with both of them. But I knew I'd met them before. Even the dynamic of their soul, nature, their energy, it is incredible. Now, what this looks like at the physical 3D, because, we're in this physical life, but we start picking up a sense about a child. Maybe you're talking to things about your child that you wouldn't talk to anybody else about. Maybe there's a bond there. maybe they're supporting you, or they see you, you know? Maybe there is something about a family member that you know that is beyond the relationship that you got now. And this is the kind of information that the Akashic Records hold. I've seen soul history of total strangers with somebody they kind of want to find out about. The records have boundaries. They're so respectful. The protocol is not digging around in someone else's Akashic Records, but from the point of the person, they're able to see the impact, the life lesson that they're learning with that person, why they're meeting up again, and where they are, what's outstanding, did something happen? And that's equally been very helpful for people. I've read for those that have had a family member, a sibling, or a cousin, or just somebody in the family, they do not get on. There's just something disconnecting them. You know, I've read for some there is an absolute, almost like hate. And they don't know why that family member hates them. And this has been really powerful, because this is the kind of information that the Akashic Records holds. Well, it goes back to that point. Well, what is it? What happened? You know, what did you do? What did they do? And then you're able to get a sense of, well, they're still holding on to that energy, because this is what we do, you know. We hold on to patterns. We hold on to cycles. And this is what's really beautiful about the Akashic Records. And sometimes all this is done, and most of the time it's really beautiful. It's not even done on a spiritual level. We're not even conscious of it. But it's not until we get on our path that we go to realise, wow, there's just something that was going on, something with that person, that friend, that family member, and now you can let them go with love, because you've let go. You've moved forward, and you now no longer need to sort of be affected by someone's actions. And that's a really powerful part when we get to that. And I've read for some people that's been going on for years, and that's been like the icing on the cake, that their Akashic Records held that kind of information. And it's really interesting. This is always sensed, felt, known at a deeper level of your psyche. There is that intuition. It's that part of you, is in you. So this is really powerful stuff that our records hold. And it certainly can help you get a sense of when there is that connection there is that love. You know, when you've just met somebody, you just feel like you've known them forever. You don't know why. And that really does sort of resonate, you know. Something else which is sort of closely tied to that, something which happened to me, and I've written an article about it. I've also written an article about twin flames, soulmates, and also soul contracts, because this is a very interesting one, because I came across this in my records. And it talks about whether you are in a contract. Well, what is a contract? And you might want to sort of find out a little bit more information in a written article that it's on the website. But for now, let's just sort of talk about that, because a contract is something that I've seen time and time again, and I've had it in my own life, where we have almost got a thread where we will keep on meeting up with that soul, because there's like, almost kind of like there's a little bit of unresolved issue, karma. Something's gone down previously in a previous life, and we've come back again. And it's quite interesting, because the Akashic Records helps us really to understand through the lens of your soul. You know, what is these kind of contracts? Well, I know of 3. You might be doing something, you might know a little bit more information, but I'm just going to share mine, what I've learnt to date. I've learnt there is a soulmate contract. I've learnt there is a contract of protection, and there is a contract of healing, and the different dynamics of how these energetics play out in a person's life. And they will always be played out in our physical interactions and our physical lives. And it's not until we get a little bit more deeper in our awareness and our consciousness, and especially when we start moving towards on our spiritual path, our journey, where that part of you, that higher self, your soul, just clicks something inside you, that there is something beyond, there's something more to this dynamic and to this relationship. And just a personal note, incidentally, when I saw in 2017, I really started to sort of look at how to use dowsing, or another term, the pendulum, to find out more information. Wow, it's incredible of just what you can find out when you know the right questions to ask. And if anyone's on that journey, or maybe you've done a pendulum course or you're learning the pendulum, it really is an art of how to work with yes, no and maybe, and really to get so much information. So at the time when I met somebody that I was in a contract with, and I kind of went through a lot of sort of growth and self-growth, and like I mentioned, you might want to have a look, and I've actually done a podcast on it as well, how to recognise your twin flame. You might want to sort of look at that and sort of see for yourself. That podcast, by the way, is actually on YouTube, so you might want to find out and just listen to that. But at the time I found out information about this person, it was actually 10 years later. And this is the most significant thing when you start realising that information and intuition and all this kind of stuff is being fed through all the time. I knew I'd seen this person before. I knew they felt different. But at the time, I didn't even have the vocabulary. I didn't even have the awareness of what this all was, because that was back in 2008. So by the time I grew on my journey and I was with this person, and then I got to kind of 2017, just before they transitioned and they died, I was able to find this valuable information out, and it was all there. Just our history, what we'd come actually to do, and what happened, why we got stuck and we kept meeting up, and why this lifetime was the one where that he could transition and that I would then continue and be at peace. So it was really very incredible of just what you can find out through the Akashic Records, how it started, well, what happened, how is it affecting you now? Because at some level I knew I was in some kind of a cycle with him, but I didn't know what it was. Of course, that's the beauty of what we've got is linear time, where I kind of worked through that and was able to sort of understand how these contracts, how they work, and why we can resolve them, we can let them go, and how we can, quite often it doesn't even take the Akashic Records, but it's wonderful, if you have that awareness and that you can do that. I did do mine all through the Akashic Records. But, we just need to put cognizance and awareness around it and let it go. So it's very powerful, just even the shift on our planet and how we can now really access a lot of this stuff, which 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, it was kind of like locked, sealed a little bit. So another thing that the records help us with, and I've done various podcasts and written blog information about this, and that's earthbound souls, attachments, and how they can affect you. And you can find out, are there any earthbound souls attached that are affecting you? And I've done this for many persons that I've read with, and how we can talk that through. I've made it quite clear, this is not scary stuff. You know, once we kind of see through the lens of the soul, this isn't scary possession stuff. This is actually really our mental health really declines, and when we really get stuck, and how that can really escalate. And I'm really grateful that I kind of went through that experience. But one of the things, when I knew that things were going quite wrong, and I talk about in those blogs, you know, spirit attachments and hearing voices in your head that are not yours, I make it quite clear, you know, the patterns that they use, and how the Akashic Records told me that from the get-go. Made it quite clear, yes, there are these, and I then didn't have to second guess myself. I trusted that part because I could feel what was going on. The mind intrusions, my, you know, working with channeling was really sort of skew-whiffed, and hearing voices, etc. So it's a very powerful way, you know, and our higher self will always guide you. And it did with me, and that was my first thing I went to, and that was the first place that I got my truth. Yes. And how I've been able to lower the voices, disengage, understand who they really are, because once we know who it's not us, then we can really start sort of separating ourselves and not sort of having a vibrational likeness. So something else, just to shift gears a little bit, because there's lots of goodies I just really want to get in for you to help you to sort of see just how powerful and where all this information is held within you, your Akashic Records. And this is something that I've experienced myself and I've helped others out with. When a past life kind of seeps through or kind of leaks into the present life. Now, what does that look like? Well, this is where you kind of get into a pattern and a cycle, either with a situation or with a person. And this is when we're going in our physical lives when we don't feel right. I know when something's not quite right. I get a sense of it. And I'm just going to pause for a minute there, because you might already have known or felt or gone for a past life regression, or maybe you've even had an Akashic record reading, or maybe you've done a guided meditation and you saw something of yourself that kind of helped you to understand what's going on now. And you know what? Once we get to grips with that, once we understand, okay, maybe different genders, different kind of situation, but the same energy of the pattern is what you did back then, is what you're doing now. This is really powerful. This is why our higher self then shows us this, so we can just close that door. Close that energetic portalway that is open to that past life, understand it, and then just let it go. So that we can understand, and how we were feeling and what we were doing is pretty much mirroring what we did before. I have seen that so many times. That's what soul realignment is all about. It's understanding these patterns and cycles that we do, because we're all creatures of habit. We kind of do the same thing. We get stuck with the same things. But there comes a time when we need to be freed. It needs to be resolved. We need to let it go. And that is when that part of you will navigate you and will show you through various means. Like I mentioned, might be in a dream state, might be a meditation. You might be familiar with the Linda Howe Access Pathway Prayer. Or you might have even found your own way. Or the other alternative is that you've just come across this podcast because you're ready now to find out some really valuable information. So it's really powerful what the Akashic Records hold. It's got the hub of all information. You know, are there benefits? Absolutely yes. I've seen the benefits in my life and for all those over the years that I've read for. You know, it gives you the answer to the questions that you have. It gives you. It's your higher self that is pulling that information. And incidentally, every time, and I always say this to a person, that this isn't a psychic reading. And they certainly have their place and they're important. But the Akashic Records, if you go for a soul reading, that information is really spearheaded by your higher self, your guides, and your counsel, your masters and teachers. When I access into a total stranger's Akashic Records, I only am allowed to see what that soul is now ready to know, and I'm just helping and sharing what it is that they need to find out at that time. Because that's what we do. We help each other along the way. You know, it is, you know, it takes time to read the Akashic Records. Or especially if you want to kind of do it professionally, it takes also monetary expenditure, a commitment and a time to read and to get good at it, case study, and then to start sort of helping others. Or it might be that you are drawn to maybe going to somebody and just getting this kind of information. I kind of want to let you know there is so much love and respect in the Akashic Records. You know, it's beautiful just how much that information is and how we can share that. And it's really a wonderful bond, and it's always a very honour and a privilege that we, and I always say we met up in whatever year that was, and we would remind each other and just share that, really lifting the veil of that kind of valuable, really deep and really powerful information into our consciousness, into the life that we've got now. Because once we've got that kind of information, you can't undo consciousness. You know, you can't undo it, you can't unsee it, you can't unknow it. Well, then that's a responsibility. You know, it's moving forward, learning and growing and understanding, getting a level of orientation in our physical life. So the Akashic Records are really powerful. They're not in anybody else other than yourself. We hold our own. And if you're here on a purpose, or maybe you're ready to learn how to access that, and this is just like the catalyst, yes, go and do it, which is beautiful. Because that's certainly, I didn't realise that when I was doing it, I was purely selfishly doing it for me. And then I realised my soul was saying, you're going to help others. Because we said we would remind each other. And that's really beautiful, that we can help each other along the way on our path, remembering our purpose, lifting the veil, and really sort of accessing this knowledge and this wealth of wisdom. And incidentally, I really just kind of want to bring in also, this is exactly what happens in hypnosis and in the past life regression, the quantum healing hypnosis. There have been many a times that somebody's been in the library, which is the Akashic Records, or the higher self will find that life in the Akashic Records and show them it for themselves. Whereas when I do an Akashic Record reading for someone, I will see what's going on. I get a sense of what's happened to that person, and my higher self and my guide will bring forward key points that your higher self wanted you to know about that life, the pattern, so that once we are aware and get cognizant of how we're doing, why we're doing it, then we can release it and let it go. And yes, we can change karma, which is really incredible. We can change and course correct any time. Karma is the consequences of the choices that we make. And we can change them. That's the power. We've got free will here on our planet. So it's really powerful, the Akashic Records. They really are a tool that we can use to get this information. And I hope you found this information really useful, helpful, because I know when I'm doing these podcasts, when we're talking, I'm talking to you. I know there's many out there that just kind of needed this information. We're just helping each other out, because that's what it's about. So please hit the subscribe button, because you won't want to miss the future podcasts. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, and other listed platforms. And if you'd like some more information, then please do go on and visit the website at learnreikiandconnect.co.uk. And there you will have a look at some of the powerful tools. You'll see the Akashic Records there. I do offer Akashic Records readings and sessions, which are all done by Skype. You don't even have to travel for that kind of work and information. I've even made it so that the powerful Usui technique and method of connecting to Source to meditate and heal ourselves is done through the online Reiki courses on level 1 and 2. Now, I've also put on there, if you would like to use the pendulum, or you're into the pendulum and you're into dowsing, you might want to check out the online course. There's a workshop I've put together, how to speak to your higher self using the pendulum. And in this course, you will see straight away how you can access information from your higher self just by getting into a centered state, a meditative state, that frequency which I've talked about so many times, the alpha, the theta. You already do it. We can put ourselves into that frequency, and you'll be able to find out how to do that. I'll lay down a procedure so that you are guaranteed to have your accuracy and your truth. And what answers from the higher self will be like, and when the conscious mind interrupts, and how to program your pendulum. I've even put together on that workshop, that online course, just 3 areas where there are set questions, because if you're familiar with dowsing, it is all about the questions. And I use this in my own personal life, and I use it to help others as well. So you'll be able to find out how your chakra flow is flowing and how it's impacting you. You'll also have a set of questions about being stuck in life. When you reach a part when you are stuck, you feel blocked, you kind of hit a roadblock and you don't know why or what it is. And you kind of sit in that space and you don't know what to do. These set of questions will help you work it out, because you can work it out. And where are you on the path? I've put a whole set of valuable questions. How you can then start intuiting, just being guided by your higher self. Where are you on the path? Now you might want to check that out. See for yourself. If it resonates, that's wonderful. So I've really hope you've enjoyed just tuning in, listening about the power of the Akashic Records. It's within you. And this is one of the most powerful ways, and you're probably doing it, which is the most incredible thing. A lot of this we're doing it unconsciously until we start understanding, I had those thoughts, I had that hunch, I had that feeling, I had this, and we go on and on. Because your higher self is showing you valuable information. Or you would like to take it a step further and really start accessing that kind of information. So I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking with you next time. don't forget, please subscribe and follow me on the various platforms like I mentioned. And until next time, do take care and bye for now.